All right. Today on the Leadership Puzzle, I have the pleasure of welcoming one of my all-time favorite people, Fritz Maier. Fritz is one of the best HR professionals in the world. He brings deep expertise with just really an uncanny ability to inspire those around him. One of the things that I have enjoyed with my time with Fritz is every conversation is insightful and downright enjoyable if I'm being honest. So, whether we're talking about building strategies, mentoring teams, he just has wisdom that I always learn something about. So I leave our chats feeling energized, and I'm thrilled to have him on the show because I know you're going to leave feeling energized after listening to him. So buckle up for a great conversation. Fritz, thank you for joining the Leadership Puzzle.
Yeah, thanks so much for having me here. Can you hear me okay?
Yeah, no, it sounds
Awesome.
great. It sounds
Awesome.
great.
Awesome.
So this season on the Leadership Puzzle has been about helping leaders understand the value of human resources. Too many times I think there's not to date myself, but there's this concept of the evil HR director, and HR is just out to get people and whatnot. And while our function is still a long way from being seen as a strategic function, you've cracked that code. You're one
I,
of the good guys.
I've been very, very blessed in my career, Jeff, and thanks again for having me. I think that when you look at organizations that utilize strategic HR as cliche seat at the table folks, it really, really helps to drive organizations. I think it impacts so many things, and the challenge with organizations that don't use HR as a strategic business partner is that they really don't get the full advantage of the talent and the ability to come up with solutions to problem solve. I've been in both situations. I've worked for folks who are like, okay, we're gonna put HR over here in the corner, and here's your policy book, and wag the finger when you need to, and then we're gonna just put some of the problems on your desk occasionally. But I've also been in organizations where I've been lucky enough to collaborate and be side by side with a CEO, a COO, and be privy to not just details, but the problem solving that
Yeah.
goes on with change management and transformation. And I think that's critical when you're looking at strategic human resources and part and parcel to really driving the business and the growth.
Yeah. Yeah, I didn't come up with this terminology, but I think that people are the competitive advantage of an organization, and it amazes me sometimes how few leaders actually think in that kind of context. It's our innovation, it's our process, it's our well, it's me as the CEO that's
Right.
driving the
Right.
success of the organization, and it's really kind of the people. And so that's always been an interesting dynamic to understand.
Yeah, Simon Sinek has this whole thing where he talks about he was at this high end hotel chain at one point, and he began talking to one of the baristas in the coffee shop, and the young man was excited and engaged and really, really brand positive in that organization. And he started talking to him a little bit about, what is it that makes you so committed? And the young man disclosed to him. He said, "Well, I have two jobs, so I also work for another coffee shop down the way." And he said the difference is everything is recognized and people are spoken to and treated in a certain type of way. And he said at my other job, it's not the same. My other job, I go in and I do the work that's asked of me, and then I leave. In this job, I come in and I feel like I'm part of the team, I'm part of the family, and that's the real driver. I mean, to really kind of elevate your point, anyone can buy a cash register and open a storefront. It's about really, really having individuals that you train that you develop and that you grow so that they can literally help to drive your brand and your business results.
Yeah. Now you've worked for some amazing companies. I mean, Disney, Fanatics. I mean, you saw Fanatics at, through that growth. Now the companies may have forgotten some of those core components, but in your experience, was was that part and parcel of what enabled them to really grow?
Oh, yeah, definitely. So with Disney, I think the fact is that Disney was never afraid to fail, and Disney is a company. You'll see all the complaints online, et cetera. Oh, they don't pay enough, or they don't do this, they don't do that. But at the end of the day, what Disney does is they grow and develop folks. I mean, I got into Disney at the front desk, right, at Disney Consumer Products, answering the phone for like $7 an hour. But they find people who are good problem solvers. They find people who are good relationship builders and collaborators, and those are key characteristics. And through all of that, there's an authentic nature to that culture that really, really helps. They ask, hey, I'll never forget. I was in a meeting and someone said, hey, who can build an access database? Again, this is years ago. Who can build an access database for the Disney stores? And of course, I raised my hand and I said, I'll try it. I'll do it. And they allow you that opportunity. And from that opportunity, it makes you feel more like you're part of the team. Fanatics was kind of a testament to adaptability and agility in space. So Fanatics had so many things going on. I mean, I can remember being in a meeting one time and we had three acquisitions on the horizon. And I was just like, oh my God, how are we going to do this? And it's really about, okay, shifting focus, being able to be completely flexible about what you're doing in terms of an integration or I mean, when I got to Fanatics, I was moved from New York City down to Jacksonville. Within a matter of 5 months, I was moved out to open up the West Coast in North Las Vegas. And then my boss called me and said, "Hey, we just acquired this new company in Tampa. Would you move back to Florida?" And it's really about looking at, okay, what are the priorities and what are the needs of the organization? And when you build a culture where people feel valued and you build a culture where people look at it and say, wow, opportunity is being given to me, right? And people do respect me and treat me with care, et cetera, et cetera. And you get rewarded for that. That's the place. I mean, we took Fanatics from like 700 million to 26 billion, I think, in 4.5 years that I was there.
That's amazing. That's amazing. Which had to be built on top of people. Because
Always.
I mean, it's not like Fanatics had something completely different, but it was the people that were delivering it in a different way that made it unique.
There were some key leaders there that really understood the importance of growth and development. And you're bringing people in, you're moving people around, you're providing them with opportunity in an authentic way. You're also understanding of your focus is on others, right? Your focus is on how can I help this person be successful, and that's where I get into from my personal standpoint is servant leadership. A lot of the folks that were there were folks that really believed in the pyramids the other way around. I'm going to spend some time in the warehouse working the shipping bin. I'm going to spend some time in the blanks room, just helping people get acclimated and doing training development. That's what it's about. It's adapting, it's agility, and it's making the business growth, really furthering that growth because of the fact that the people are the key contributors to that growth.
Yeah, I remember one time there was a business unit that had some amazing leaders, and we were I can't remember if it was year end or quarter end that gosh, we had a backlog of orders, and there was a plant in like the middle of Kansas nowhere. I mean, it was like, and we were struggling to find enough people to come in and build the widget, whatever it was that they were building. to fulfill all these orders. And those leaders of that business unit, like the whole executive team, flew in, stayed at like a Motel 6.
Sure.
Motel 6 probably would have been a step up from where they actually stayed. And they went in and they helped get the products out and deliver to the customers. That's not product. That's not process. That's just people willing
Right.
to step in, leaders willing to step in and do whatever job necessary to get the results for the business.
Yeah. We had a lot of folks like that, whether it was, Robin Aletto as our head of HR, Lonnie, Dom, Scott. We had so many folks that, they had a C in their title, but that C wasn't as important as them getting the job done with the team. And so
Yeah.
you would see those folks on the front lines, um, at new things that we were trying. I mean, we did some stuff with NASCAR that was brand new in the field in terms of just kind of branding, in terms of bringing the product directly to the consumer in the event space, right? I can remember we did this prototype where people could order. We did something with the Orlando Pride, which is the MLS team, and they were doing like a showcase game with one of the European league soccer league teams, and we literally had this we were trialing or test piloting in this thing where people could go onto their phone and order a jersey while they were at the game, and we would bring them the jersey to their seat and
Oh
any
my
other
gosh.
merchandise. I mean, it was unbelievable. But that was the kind of thinking that said, hey, you know what? We're all in this together. So let's all pitch in and do what worked. We had a great CEO, we had great leadership, and really drove the business, and such a great leader in Michael Rubin as well.
Okay, so you're an HR guy, yet you're talking like a business leader, right? And this I think is a valuable mindset shift from any leader, CEO, COO, uh, who wants to try to put HR into a box of, oh yeah, you're just the people police, or you're
Yeah.
just the policy makers, or you're just the evil HR directors. But uh, getting into that mindset of going, you know what, the right HR leader is not just about people, but they're a business leader.
No, they're not the party planners, and that's the differentiation of the question you asked initially, which is, um, if I look at the wine shipping experience, which was a private equity play, and I had an incredible COO there who literally, Rob Sell, who literally like latched onto me and said, "Hey, we got to integrate these two businesses." It was two businesses that had merged, or one had been acquired by the other, and our private equity partner wanted to sell the business over a period of time, and the CEO, Eric Lewis, myself, Rob Sell, really kind of sat down and said, look, how are we going to do this? How are we going to get SOPs standardized across the board of these two integrated organizations? How are we going to get um, really the whole thing to look as one, and capitalize on some of the things that had happened during COVID, et cetera. And we were able to do that because of the collaboration, because of the partnership. And you do that with trust, you do that with credibility. And as I always, when I'm mentoring folks, I always say, look, under promise, over deliver,
Yeah.
and stand by with an authentic sense of do what you say you're going to do, and deliver it on time. And those are things that I think are so important and critical in HR. That's how you get to be a credible, trusted business partner.
One of the things that you said earlier is, you were at Disney and they gave you an opportunity. Who wants to build an access database, and you raised your hand, and I think that's a capability, a core mindset of, hey, you know what? I may be in human resources, or I may be in talent acquisition, or I may be in learning development, whatever the HR function is, but that willingness to do something that is different. I remember I was in Tokyo. I don't know, it was like 2 months into being the HR director for the Tokyo division of Intel, and the president of Japan, Intel Japan, came to me and said, "Hey, I've got to do a speech to a bunch of tech leaders, and it needs to be in English." And he obviously was Japanese, and he said, I need it to be Obama-esque, really engaging and motivating.
That's a pretty high bar, my friend.
It is, right? And I'm thinking, okay, I've done my fair share of presentations. And so he like needed this 5 minute like speech, engaging grand opening speech for this conference, welcome speech. And this, mind you, this is before Chat GPT. I couldn't just put it in and go, hey, Claude or Gronk or whatever, give me a Obama-esque speech. And so I took on the challenge to do that, and that's what turned his mindset, not only from being a foreigner in the Japanese culture, not necessarily being fully embraced, but also HR not necessarily being
Right.
fully embraced by this leader and the other leaders previously. And so my willingness to step out of the HR bubble into something else to help the business leader was transformative. And I think that's a characteristic that you have, that you've taken from early days at Disney when you raised your hand and said, I can do Access database.
Right. And I had no clue how to do an Access database, quite honestly. And some of your young listeners won't know this, but I literally spent the next 3 days in the upper room at the Borders bookstore in Pasadena, California, reading, taking books, reading books, taking books, taking notes, figuring out how do I do this, right?
Yeah.
And to your point is we didn't have access to, chat GPT, AI, et cetera. And, oh, show me how to build an Access data. We didn't have YouTube, right? And so when you look at these things, that process in and of itself, if you create an entrepreneurial culture, that process in and of itself challenges the growth and development of your employees. Creating a learning organization is exactly how you drive the growth. The growth of your employees fuels the growth of your business. And it has to be collaborative. There has to be adaptability in it. And that's the agility that really, really helps to conceptualize what great looks like. Again, I'll really date myself. If you're thinking good to great,
Yep.
how do you really kind of walk through that to be able to visualize and conceptualize what great looks like?
Oh, yeah, for sure. I mean, we could probably go down a whole rabbit hole of the flywheel and the window and the mirror concept from a leadership perspective, and good to great. Gosh, 20 years now. I mean, I can't
Right.
believe how, so we didn't really date ourselves on that one, but anybody listening that hasn't read Good to Great from a leadership perspective, it is highly recommended.
Yeah.
Another, you brought up, kind of just some of the younger listeners and how these days, they're not necessarily taught how to problem solve without using some of the tools. But there's another component that of your career that I think is a hallmark of why you were successful, and that was that willingness to go where the company needed you to go to take that next step and learn that next next part of the business. Hey, they wanted me to go to Jacksonville. They wanted me to go to, Nevada. And I think that's a lost art in and of itself. I mean, I did a lot of that myself, but not around the US. I went from
Right.
Malaysia to Japan to Russia. So, you know, what, what do you think? What do you think leaders today, you know, is that willingness and ability to make those moves? You think that makes a difference in the environment today versus when, we were, you know, uh, building our careers?
I do, and the reason I do is because somebody asked me this great question, and this is analogous to the question you just asked, and somebody said during an interview process at one point, "Why would you ever leave Disney? They took you here, they grew you there, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera." And I responded with, as crazy as it sounds, I wanted to know if I knew what I needed to know.
Hmm.
And what I mean by that is so much of success in leadership is relationship building and collaboration. And you have to understand how to take feedback. You have to understand that when you have a disagreement, it's not necessarily adversarial. And you have to understand, your ego has to understand that none of us is as smart as all of us. And when I left Disney, when I made the choice to leave Disney to go to AOL, um, that whole piece was really predicated on, okay, so we have this new technology coming in. We have this kind of new world order framing up around the internet. Okay. I had done the Western European stuff with Disney Publishing. I had done the contact center stuff and all of the great hospitality guest services stuff with Disney Direct Marketing, Disney Regional Entertainment, et cetera. And obviously Disney consumer products and the Disney stores had a huge impact on my growth. But I was like, you look at this new stuff and you say, look, if you're comfortable in place, what is the old quote? They say, you know, if you're the smartest person in the room, you're probably in the wrong room. I mean, that was for me, that's what it was. It was, after 9+ years at Disney, I was like, look, um, I'm doing very well here. I love it here. I love the Walt Disney Company. I've recommended to so many people. I was like, go there, work there, challenge yourself, and force yourself to stay there for at least 5 years because it's such an incredible organization. You understand how highly matrixed it is. You understand how to be protective of brand. But at the end of the day, sooner or later, you outgrow your flower pot and you need to venture out because that will challenge your growth, that will challenge your problem solving, and that will help you better understand the differences between being in a position of comfort and being in a position of challenge and opportunity.
And I think there's certain points in careers where uh, you are so familiar to an organization that you're going to top out, and even though you're delivering results and whatnot in the psyche of everybody around you, um you might not get to that next level because inevitably there's going to be new leaders coming in. They're going to be bringing people from the outside, and they're going to have a different perspective. And so sometimes before you're you outstay your welcome, if you will,
Right.
jumping to that next opportunity where you do have that opportunity to kind of continue to grow and develop your career is a smart thing.
Well, agreed, and that's I've said to friends of mine, I've had friends of mine say, who've been at organizations for, I specifically remember a dear friend of mine in New York City who had been at a large media company for 20 years, and he was like, "Oh, I can do this with my eyes closed." Da, 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 da. And I said to him, "Dude, go find something new to cultivate you, to kick you in the rear end, and to shock that brain a little bit, um, because that's where a lot of this growth came from. And he
Yeah.
said, "Oh no, I'm not going to do that. They'll never get rid of me, and I'll just keep moving up and sure enough, 2 years later, that's what happened. And
Yeah.
he called me up and he said, you were so right. And I said, look, I got a great piece of advice from somebody who was a manager of mine when I was at Disney Regional Entertainment. And she said to me, and I absolutely loved her, and she said to me, Fritz, in the end of all of this, your passion, your consideration, your drive, and your intelligence are all wonderful, but you are a number on a spreadsheet. And eventually, if you don't continue to grow, if you don't find that bigger flower pot, if you will, um, you'll be one of those numbers. Your number comes up, and so to speak. And so, I encourage people. I want people to stay in their organizations for 5 to 10 years. But at the end of the day, is if you find an opportunity, or if you feel as if you've stagnated, it is your responsibility to your self development, to your self growth, that you find an opportunity that will challenge you and that will lead you into new processes of problem solving and authenticity.
Yeah, I tell folks when I talk about their career and whatnot is everybody is replaceable.
Yeah.
Which
And
good.
yeah, I mean, and that's, I think we all know that. In fact, another piece of feedback I had from another great GM, who wasn't necessarily in HR, but he was one of my, we were, business partners in one of the operations that I was in. He said to me, and I said, give me some critical feedback. And you really have to ask for feedback because people are so tentative at times.
Yeah.
And he said, you haven't changed your team fast enough. And I said, well, what do you mean? He said, Fritz, you've got a couple of folks on your team that need to be up or out, 9 box reference, right?
Yeah.
And he said you've got some stagnation on your team in one of your areas, and he said you didn't change your team fast enough. And he said that's the one thing I would tell you about the last 2.5 years that we've worked side by side, and it was great feedback. And you know what? He was spot on. And
Yeah.
I had focused so much, I had kind of put the blinders on because I was so focused on the results of what we were trying to do with this project in terms of transitioning this part of the business, that I wasn't paying enough attention to the performance management of some individuals on my team. So
It,
well
it's
taken.
it's always interesting. I talk to leaders, not just HR leaders, but leaders in general too. They step into new roles, new opportunities, new companies, and they see pretty early on that they have employees that aren't quite up to the mark, if you will. Yeah, they're like, oh, but I don't want to stir the pot too much. I want to try
Right,
and get
right.
the lay of the land, and
Guilty.
and uh, and eventually when the conversations happen and you help them find some other opportunity, whether it's in the company or outside the company, you you kind of go, oh, I wish I had done that earlier. Why didn't I do that 6 months ago? I can't tell you how many times I've heard that. Oh, I wish I'd done that 6 months ago. It's one of those things that leaders can talk themselves into keeping poor performers or underperforming people long past it because of
It's the do enough.
yeah.
Oh, they're not really doing any major damage.
Yeah.
And it's like your job as the leader of that piece of the business of that part of the organization is to continually be looking at how am I raising the bar? Like your Obama-esque speech, right? So,
Yeah.
whoa, but at the end of the day, again, if you're not striving, I think Vince Lombardi said that, we're striving for perfection every day. We will never achieve it, but we're going to look damn good getting there.
Yep.
And the reality around that is that's what's important. You have to be able to look at that. And I did. I said to the person when they gave me that feedback, I thought about it. Then the next day I was like, God, you're so right.
Yeah.
And that's what you need to be doing.
Yeah. Yeah. Too often, and I haven't done this enough in my career of like, what feedback do you have for me? How can I be better? And just shut up and not say anything, not try to justify my actions or defend what I did or haven't done, but just shut up and listen to what a wise person has to say about who's interacted with me.
Right. And in some of my instances where I've been coaching executives, a couple of things that I've really coached people on is be comfortable with the quiet.
Mm.
Don't be thinking about a defensive stance of how you're going to respond to that feedback. Take the pause, reprocess that feedback. Okay, because our in a very fast paced corporate environment, the challenge is I'm thinking of how to respond right away. Right, I'm not even I'm you know a good retention level is just under 50%, right? So you're getting a certain number of words. People say the average is somewhere around 37, 38%, but the reality is as you process this is pause, even ask for some paraphrase, help me frame that a little bit more.
Yeah.
And then listen to the quiet and then work through some of it in your head before you immediately jump to, well, well, no, 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 no. Well, Sheila's really great. Sheila, I know she's not a superstar, but she gets her work done, and instead of going to that place, a good leader will pause, actively listen, and process. And then, like I said, I came back the next day and sat with Scott, and I was like, you were so right about that. And that was a blind spot for me. And acknowledge your blind spots, and then manage better, be better.
Because we all have blind spots.
Oh, every day, every day. I make mistakes every single day.
Well, maybe not every day. You're one of the special ones, Fritz. Um, I want to pivot a little bit on this. I mean, we're talking careers and whatnot, and the last couple of years have been difficult for HR and talent acquisition leaders as companies have lowered their costs. I mean, lots of layoffs, lots of people, but HR, because so many leaders do think of HR as a cost center, it seems to be a place of like, okay, well, we can cut HR and especially talent acquisition. If you're not hiring, you don't need a bunch of small army of TA folks running around. Did I lose you? I lost you, didn't I? Oh, I can't hear you now. I lost I lost your mic. Test, test, test. Okay. Can you hear me? No. Can you hear me okay?
I can hear you now.
Oh, there we
Yes.
go. Okay,
Okay.
there we
So
go.
what headphones died
Uh,
in literally in mid sentence, and
okay. All
so
right.
they're back in the charger. But I can hear you now without the headphones.
Okay. Well, we'll go back to we'll start over that question.
Okay.
All right. All right, Fritz. We've been talking a lot about career, and I want to transition a little bit because over the last couple of years, a lot of leaders, HR, talent acquisition, and other leaders have found themselves in position where they've lost their job. They've found themselves in this space of being in transition. HR and talent acquisition have been hit really, really hard because too many companies consider HR as an overhead cost. You don't see it as much in the finance world because those leaders don't think of finance as overhead, even though they're just as much overhead as HR. So I'd love to just pick your brain as an HR leader. Uh, what what suggestions can you give the leaders who might be listening to this podcast on how they can successfully navigate such a difficult time in their personal life?
I think uh, the challenge is I think is how are you quantifying and in organizations that look solely at HR as a support function, as opposed to being a driver of business objectives and the alignment of strategy. Um, that's where it can be a problem. The way to overcome that is with an ability to deliver results and be able to quantify some aspects of those results, which is not easy. There's a number of ways to frame up turnover and attrition and retention rates, et cetera. They have different scorecards and scoring techniques and tools. Um, you know, but what you want to be able to do is to measure certain aspects of what the HR function is doing. So in TA, you're looking at, what is your conversion rate in terms of candidacies? Are you using, are you creating a database of folks that are applying and being able to have a best practice time to fill, right? Are you looking from an organizational standpoint? Are you looking at, um, which managers are losing people and being able to either coach and develop them, or be able to say, what, um, of our losses of people that we have deemed to be, in our top percentage of talent, the people that are quitting are all quitting in this function under this manager, et cetera, et cetera. How are we doing with our, everybody hates work-life balance statements, but the reality is, you know, what is if you're taking an employee survey, what is your score around, yes, I recommend this as a place to work to others? Um, there are all sorts of metrics around this stuff, but you have to be able to frame that up. And you probably should be doing a quarterly report out. And that gives you an ability to quantify a little bit of what the contribution is to the organization. The flip side of that is, and I've got a couple of examples from my history. Um, are working in collaboration partnership to build some trust and build some credibility across operations where you can add value together. So I say that with a couple of different things in mind. One of them is a guy that I worked with when I was at Disney Direct Marketing, and you mentioned Kansas earlier. So I was down in Overland Park, Kansas, for a spell, working the contact center for the Walt Disney Company for Disney Direct Marketing. And that it was a 400-seat contact center. It managed our affinity clubs, our reservations for dining and hotels, et cetera, at a lot of the resorts across the world. And one of the things that came up was you're managing call volume with workforce planning to talk time and to cost per minute. So you say to yourself, so if you have 400 people working or 200 people working or 100 people working, and suddenly you get this flood of calls, how are you queuing that up and getting your employees to respond appropriately? So one of the things that we did was we installed I was working with the person who was in charge of operations and workforce planning, and for our center director, because it was basically for every second saved in our talk time, it was $30,000 that dropped to the bottom line. And
wow, really?
Exactly, yeah. But the challenge is, it's Disney. So people call Disney, and what do they want to do? They want to talk all day about their experience and everything else. And so how do you couple the great customer experience, and we referred to them as our guest, the great guest experience, with the employee experience, and at the same time try to reduce that talk time to add some value, and similarly see if you can upsell on any of the things that people are doing. And that was a challenge, but we were able to do that because whenever we got a spike, you set a margin of where your call volume is in terms of inbound and how many agents you have monitoring calls at that time. And of course, a lot of organizations outsource this to some big players in this space. But what we did is anytime the call volume exceeded what we had said was our band in terms of managing talk time effectively, and I stole this from the old Kmart company, was the blue light special. We installed blue sirens around the contact center, and anytime it spiked, we'd flip that on. That mean that everybody had to go switch into their function to respond to that, to reduce the spike, to maintain our thing. And again, myself and a couple other folks got the idea from Kmart, from the blue light specials. We added that, and we significantly reduced any call volume that went outside the range. And so anytime we got a spike, we could bring it right back down and more effectively manage that. That brought us a significant reduction in costs, which that was the quantifiable number, which said, this is how you manage that operation. Additionally, I had a similar situation when I was at Fanatics for error rates, partnering with a GM, one of the buildings there, and we changed some of the orientation planning based upon the languages of the people that were applying. And we found that 80% of the folks that were when we ramp up for season, as we go into the holidays, 80% of the folks were not native English speakers, and so we had to change our orientation programs to be in English and Spanish. We had to change the signage in the building because most of these folks, they didn't know the difference between a Philadelphia Eagles green and a Green Bay Packers green. What do the New York Jets green look like, and what numerals go onto the jersey in terms of production, et cetera. But all of these things are just little things that when you really kind of dig down into it, you make yourself a part of the business and you partner and collaborate. Those are the little solutions you come up with, which can add value for the business, and you can quantify that value.
Yeah. No, that's great. That's great. Well, Fritz, we're unfortunately out of time, but hopefully you'll come back and join us in the next season. This has been really, really fun to listen and hear your wisdom. So thank you for joining us.
I've loved it, Jeff. Thanks so much for the opportunity, and I look forward to the next time.
All right. Well, thank you everyone for watching and listening to Fritz and hearing his wisdom. Be sure to join in next time on the Leadership Puzzle.